Good evening, everyone. My name is Liz Scott. As chairperson of Arts at Clark, together with our wonderful library director, Gail Bogle, and tonight's presenter, James Vanderberg, we would like to welcome you all to Clark Memorial Library's first Artists in Conversation event. This is our new monthly remote program to provide a connection between local artists and the Bethany community. The idea for this program, as well as last August's very successful and fun drive-through art exhibit, was actually that of tonight's presenter, James Vanderberg. The Clark Memorial Library is planning another outdoor art exhibit this coming August and are also hoping that sometime in 2022, we will be able to resume live in-person art exhibits inside the library as we had during the 4 years before the pandemic. In just a few minutes, James will give his presentation. Afterwards, there will be time for questions, comments, and perhaps some lively discussions. But first, let me tell you a little bit about tonight's guest artist. James Vanderberg was born and raised on Long Island, New York. His work continues to harken back to the waterways and beaches of this landscape. A recent transplant to the Bethany area, James enjoys painting from nature and making a connection between the figure and landscape. James received his M.F.A. from CUNY Hunter College in 2008, creating large-scale abstract paintings, for which he earned the Hunter College Tony Smith Award for exceptional graduate work. While at Hunter, he was also awarded the Luetz Riedel Fellowship for exchange travel to L'ecole Des Beaux Arts in Paris, France. Currently, James is the educator for grades 9 through 12, university and academic outreach at the Yale Center for British Art, where he teaches both art history and studio programs. James has also taught as an adjunct professor at Fordham University in the Bronx, New York, Nassau Community College, Trestle Gallery in Brooklyn, and P.I. International Art School in Seoul, South Korea. He was director of the Visual and Performing Arts Department at St. John's Preparatory School from 2013 to 2020. His artwork is collected nationally, and recent paintings and works on paper are available at Gallery Gree in Hudson, New York. May I present James Vanderberg. Take it away, James.
I think we had a much larger crowd in this nice Zoom space. So when I was putting this talk together, I realized that I only had a half hour, and I had a lot of work that I wanted to share, and I had a certain story that I wanted to tell, because depending on how I look at my work or how some people look at my work, there's these sort of connection points that make it all come together. I think in a really meaningful way. So I want to try to tell that narrative, excuse me, of my process. And at the end, we'll have some time for questions. I just asked that during the actual presentation, if we can all remain muted, and then afterwards we can just open it up and have a nice chat. I realize I'm irrationally nervous to give this talk, but this is probably stacked with most of my docents from the Yale Center for British Art. So this is basically just a docent meeting. So I have nothing to be nervous about. And as they know, I love to throw curveball art projects at them that drive them a little bit nuts. And so I'm going to pitch this to the audience, and you can do it if you want or not. And this is going to come later at the end of this talk. If you have a minute to grab a piece of paper and a pencil, while I'm talking, I want you to do this assignment, which is to draw a simple self-portrait. And the prompt that I'm giving you is, as an artist that makes bad art. And over on the left there is a little example for you to follow. So the artist that you're looking at is a comic artist named Linda Barry that I really admire, and I read and follow her books in my own practice. And she writes her graphic novels as syllabi. So they're teachable syllabus that you can follow, and they're also a visual narrative story, which is really unique. And so she has this little structure here for drawing a self-portrait. And she says that when we're kids and we're young and we draw and we experiment, we do whatever we want. We create with abandon, and we don't think about the end result. We think about the experience and the process, and the images that show up in that very open and very free experience of creating is basically what artists try to do for the rest of their lives. I am constantly sitting next to my kids, drawing with them and stealing their ideas and taking their little scraps that they finish and bringing them down into my studio and thinking, gee, how did they figure this out? How did they make such that beautiful mark? Or how did they combine those colors? Or why did they make that thing? And how fresh and how immediate it feels. So Linda Barry says that at a certain point, we all get stuck in our heads and we become adults and basically worthless as creatives. And that's when we start drawing stick figures. It's not as kids that we draw stick figures. It's as adults that we draw stick figures. And a stick figure has no soul, right? There's no space physically in it for a soul. So Barry gives us this example for drawing a figure where you start with a round head. Let's see if I can use this little pointer thing here. Hold on. There we go. So you start with this round head. It's oversized. You make a little rectangular shaped body. You add some squiggles. You put some form on those squiggles. You add little feet, little round things for hands. Add something that looks like fingers, and then add some features to your head, like hair and glasses and nose and mouth, and things that make you look like you. And this is a portrait of Linda Barry as herself. And this is all going to make sense at the end when I show you some more works that relate to this. But that's your assignment. So while I'm going on this talk, I want you to draw a self-portrait as an artist making bad art. So as Liz mentioned, I started my, I've been making art, I'd like to say, for my whole life. But this is a picture of my graduate work at the studios at Hunter College. This was the Times Square studios at Hunter College. It was this really wonderful studio building that was right behind the Port Authority. It was like the last dodgy spot of New York before it turned into Disneyland. And, we had this like ridiculous shell of a building. You could literally do whatever you wanted. One person's project was that they busted a hole through the wall and lit it on fire. And we had to sit there and watch it burn in one of the crits. So it was this real free space. And it was, next to a halfway house and like a methadone clinic. So fabulous creative energy, right? That space is no longer there. They moved the studio program to Tribeca, which is like fancy pants now. But back then, this was the spaces that we worked in, these massive factory spaces that were you could just do whatever you wanted. And so these are some examples from my thesis work. I had struggled through my graduate program. It was a real disaster. I almost got kicked out at M.F.A. program review. And it wasn't until my trip to Paris where I was able to look at painting and look at the Monets and the water lilies and really experience those paintings that I came back and started really exploring with color. And color theory is something that continues throughout my process. No matter what I'm doing, I'm always thinking about color first. These paintings, as you can see, are quite large. This was 10 by 9 feet and was a diptych in 2 pieces. And those marks are, to scale with the painting, they're about a foot wide. And I was making them with these large poles that I attached window squeegees to. So I would pour the paint and then pull it through to create these abstractions. One thing that I would say is the foundation of my practice is that I am constantly drawing. I am constantly drawing. I buy these sort of foot square pads of paper. They have 250 sheets in them. And I just pour through them with ink and with brush. I use carved chopsticks, any kind of awkward enough tool that allows me to keep my hands moving and keep the reflex moving of the mark. This is I thought this was impressive when I took it. This was 500 drawings. They were exhibited in a gallery in Brooklyn in 2010, I believe. This was the install. This is a portion of them on the wall. This was the opening, and you were able to sort of page through them on the table. At this point, I have about 3,000 of them, and I really they just become this amazing foundation for everything I do. I can look through them and get inspiration. I can remember ones that I made and when I made them. This the volume as a body of work I'm very proud of, and it's this constant reminder that my best work is the work that I make, that is fresh, that is immediate, and is the most like what my kids are doing, because they're the real geniuses around here. So gesture, color, these types of things come into the paintings for a really long time. I did a residency in the Vermont Studio Center, and this is some of the work that came from that. I tend to work a lot on one canvas. And as I was putting the slideshow together, my wife was over my shoulder and she's saying, "Oh, that's a nice one. Where's that? Oh, that's a nice one. Where's that?" And I have to keep saying, "Well, they're all gone. They're destroyed. They're painted over. There's something else. I use the wood." So I never, I have this idea that a painting has to gain a certain authority, and I can have a painting for 6 weeks or a painting for 6 years, and if it no longer holds authority for me, I paint over it, and I work with either underlying structures or I completely sand it down. I really enjoy working with a surface that has something on it, something to react to or something to react with, and most of the time paintings never they never start in any particular way and they never end the way I think they're going to. And I think that's when I set out to execute something and it happens and then it's the end result is on the wall, that's usually the first one to be destroyed, because it is not owning that authority. It's not remaining fresh and immediate, which is the experience that I really want to get. This series, however, did survive because this is a series that I really enjoyed. These are all about a foot square. The verticals are 12 by 9. And these were inspired, this was during my residency in Vermont. I had discovered this artist, Bill Jensen, and Jensen is a contemporary painter. He lives in New York. He teaches at the New York Studio School. And Jensen, he's like a real alchemist. Like, he makes all his own paints. He makes all his own mediums. He really is very much into the process of painting. And he is an abstract painter in an almost spiritual way. He had a quote in an interview once that he said, "The abstract painter is like a shaman who allows you to experience a visual space that you are not, that you do not know, and you are confronted with this visual space. And in that moment of sort of slippage and maybe confusion or intrigue or dialogue with the piece, you can enter into another way of thinking, much like a shaman would for an individual looking to experience some type of revelatory experience." And that really took to me, because for a long time, through my graduate degree, especially when I was at Hunter and everything is about theory and, the why of what you're doing. Talk about being fresh and immediate. If you ever want to strangle the creative process, go to art school. And so Jensen comes out with this reason for making abstraction, and it's almost spiritual, and it's almost beyond the plane of what the paintings are about. And I found that to be a really fascinating approach. And it was something that I held on to for a long time as a reason for making abstract painting. So drawing, abstraction, color, these are all places that these are all things that I'm sort of thinking about or carrying with me when I'm making work. And location is also really important. And that's why I made a point to put that in my bio, that, I come from Long Island, I live in Bethany, I've traveled around, I've seen some things, and all of those locations are really influential on my work. I am constantly drawing. I will literally not leave the house. I will be late for appointments because I don't have a sketchbook in my pocket. Drives my wife crazy as I'm sifting through for the right pen to take with me because we're going food shopping. But it's essential. I mean, I'm constantly recording, I'm constantly looking, I'm constantly thinking about where I am. And, Long Island, obviously, is my hometown. It's where I'm from. I grew up on the South Shore, which anyone that knows the area is, just some of the most beautiful waterways in the country. And it's a really unique place. It's not just another beach or another bit of, water and sand. It has a very unique light, it has a very unique landscape when you're out there. And my parents are on the water. I grew up on the water. My dad always had a boat of some kind that we would go out on. And he really, took me out there, and that was my entire childhood, was being out on the water and experiencing nature in that way. And so when I left my graduate program, I really tapped into that as a source of inspiration. So this is, obviously a little bit more heavy on recognizable landscape, but these paintings come from that same time period and that same series. And what these really were is, again, I was sort of searching for meaning and searching for reason within my own work. And we were sailing, and we were sort of in a luff, which means there's no wind. And we were kind of coasting along, and he's like, well, if we're just going to sit here and wait for the wind, we should learn something. And so he started showing us some knots that you can tie that are useful, the bowline knot, the clove hitch, and things like that. And I said, hand me that rope and I'll try it. And he was like, no, when you're on a ship, a rope is a line. And when you're on the land, a line is a rope. And of course I was like, oh my God, that's the best. A line is the building block of a drawing, and a rope is a line on a ship, and a line. And so we just went bananas with that. And my older brother, who's a poet, he was like, this is the best, source of thing to write about. And so we embarked on this series of drawings and poems based on that experience, and looking at our childhood home and the landscape, and drawing on this experience with being in nature and being in this nautical setting. So these are actually all paintings that are based on line structures for nautical knots. So this is a monkey's fist, which was used as a sort of ornamental knot that sailors would make to put on the end of a rope or the end of a line to as a catch, or they'd make baubles or things to hold canisters and things out of it. And so I was really excited about that as a source of something to mine for inspiration. Still having one foot in the purely abstract and thinking about color and thinking about light. I think you can see from most of these works that I'm very much interested in layers, transparency, color interactions. And so even though I'm thinking about landscape and I'm thinking about a place, I'm translating that into this more open, abstract experience of a sort of, organic grid structure and a space to get into those layers. So this grouping here is from Bethany. So I'm a recent transplant here as a resident. I've only been here for just under 2 years, but my wife's family is from Connecticut, and they moved up here about 12 years ago. And so I'm familiar with the area, and I've been coming up here for as long as definitely as long as we've been married, and even when we were dating, coming to visit my now in-laws. So this is a scene from their property, and it's a sketch of this bit of tree line, which became like a real source of inspiration. Again, we'd come up to visit, we'd be there for a weekend or even just a day, and I'd always have a sketchbook, and I'd always have some watercolors. And again, the way that sort of like New England light is it's a real thing. And when it hits at a certain hour, it just lights the whole thing on fire. And I got really inspired to do a series from this landscape that had now entered my vernacular as a really important place. Just looking at some color studies, some abstractions of the experience of nature up in the woods. And I embarked on a series to really capture this space. And it's probably the most to date literal expression of landscape that I've ever painted. And I tend not to show it because it seems like such an oddball grouping, but it's important in this narrative of these different locations. So you can see some of my source material up there. And I painted it as a triptych. I'm sure if you're from the area, that Bethany is a town from the Bible. It's the town outside of Jerusalem where Jesus stayed before entering the city before his passion. And so I made it as a triptych to kind of mimic that altarpiece type of feel. And these are some of the preliminary paintings, kind of building up the layers, still, again, thinking about color, thinking about structure. And even though the end result was quite literal, this is the final piece. The sort of the reflex and the making and the markings are all part of everything that's come before. It's a very smug picture of me. with my painting, just for scale. And another place that really influences me in a lot of ways is Bailey Island in Maine. It's an area just around the northern turn of Casco Bay, about an hour north of Portland, and we travel there in the summers. And it's just such a wonderful, wonderful place. Again, it's a different kind of light, it's a different kind of landscape, but it's this kind of wonderful mix between the Connecticut landscape and the Long Island landscape, and both of those things mixed in this really wonderful wooded and maritime space. And so this is a desk every year when we go. I set up this little suitcase studio, and the last time we were up there, I did a series, one per day for every day we were there, of the scene out that window, depending on the weather, the time of day, the light shifting, whatever it was. When I sat down, I painted it in the time that it took to do it. So these are just quick. I think they're 9x3 or something like that. It's one that I particularly like. And these are some oil stick drawings of the area as well. I got really obsessed with these little buoys that bob around for the lobsters. So after this, one of the places that I went to, as mentioned, was Seoul, South Korea. I taught there for a little bit one summer. I taught for the international school in New York, and they sent me over to Seoul to teach this camp. And so it was this really surreal experience. I was basically in a hotel outside of the airport in Incheon, which is like a nothing place. It's just like a parking lot. And I was there for 14 days or 12 days or something straight. And there's nothing to do. And so you're just in the hotel teaching for like 8 hours a day, and you get breaks for meals and to nap and stuff. But I did have 2 chances to go to Seoul and to explore on my own. I'd never been to Asia before. It was a real wild time. But I got really into these linear types of structures that I was seeing on these temples and in these screens that are painted and things like that. And so it just became this really just powerful imagery that is so modern and so abstract. And the city itself is so interesting in terms of like the architecture and the modern sense of it, where you walk around and your phone just has free Wi-Fi all the time. It's like so technologically savvy, but then you literally turn a corner and there's like an ancient temple, and it's very shocking, the comparison. So these are paintings that came from that series, or from that experience. When I came home, I was making them. And it's about this time when I lost my studio. Through all this, I'm mostly in New York. I was living in Brooklyn at the time, and I lost my studio, as most studios go in that area. And I was, at the same moment, was given a chance to have a residency at a gallery for 6 months. And it was during this time that I was moving away from large scale paintings, and I was doing, again, more drawing, but I was also really interested in comic arts. And it's something that I had always had in me from when I was a kid. When I was growing up, I thought I would be an animator. That was like the job I wanted, to work for Warner Brothers and draw Looney Tunes. And so this sort of like what I'm calling cartoon imagery or comic imagery starts to seep into the paintings. I start reading a lot about Philip Guston and looking at some contemporary painters like Catherine Bradford. And, I'm really getting excited about this sort of slippery in between of the abstract, but then also the heavier nod to figuration. Hands start to arise, objects start to arise, more sort of like centered compositions start to happen. And it's here that I think the work really starts to take form in some meaningful way. It's a little bit fleshy, it's a little bit messy, it's a lot of the same structures of building layers and scraping down are happening. I get really excited about like regional, like amusement. Like this painting was sort of a quick sketch of the parachute drop at Coney Island, and start playing with some sort of like obvious grotesque imagery. When we're in Maine, you drive along the highway and you see these like totally handmade paint, it just says like blueberries, and like you're supposed to pull off and see some weirdo about buying blueberries. And we were driving along the road, and I'm like, these are just amazing abstract paintings. Like they're just these beautiful big white structures with a big blue circle in the middle, and it's this great ultramarine. And I was like, man, I just want to grab one and hang it up. So I made one for myself. Yeah, so this is sort of where things are now, and it's a lot of where the work is going. I want to get to more recent stuff as we go along. Like I love the back of the old comic books where you could buy it's actually called a skinhead wig. It's like, buy a skinhead wig. It's like, that's a really unfortunate thing to say, but such a bizarre turn of phrase and image that you could buy for like 50 cents, like a trick finger to freak people out. This is actually one of my favorite paintings is the Courbet wave at the Brooklyn Museum, and I thought, wouldn't it, of course someone's ass would be in the way while you're looking at it. This is a painting I made, and my son said it looked like a walking cloud, and I was like, that's it, perfect title. Okay, so here is some recent work. Since the pandemic hit, I have been busy despite everything, and have been working on quite a bit. Again, drawing, ink on paper, and like we are right now, Zoom. Everything was Zoom. It was really shocking at first. I was actually still teaching in high school when the pandemic hit, so I had to go take all my classes online, and I just felt like I lived inside of a Zoom screen, and it was really tripping me out. So I made all of these drawings about it, and was trying to just get a sense of this, this new space that we are in, this new landscape that is now so completely natural, but still a struggle. This is actually a painting, if anyone that knows me, I moved up here before I got the job at Yale. So I was commuting to Queens from Bethany, and literally lived on the Merritt Parkway. And so this is a Merritt Parkway painting. Okay, so here are some paintings that came out of that time, a little bit more structured. These are all acrylic on either wood or canvas. And so here I feel like I'm really taking the color and the structure of the old work and bringing it into the new structure of the figurative narratives and the comic narratives as well. This painting was right at the top of the spring protests and all of the things were happening in New York, and was really my way of expressing survivor's guilt. I was living up here in the woods, barbecuing, and just watching my city burn. It was really traumatic. This is an installation shot from the Arts at Clark, The New Normal, which was last summer, that we put together, Liz and Gail and I, which was really fabulous. As I mentioned, we're going to do another one this year. And this was a great project. This was through a group that I'm involved with in New York, and they did that fall, they did an outdoor exhibition of murals. They gave us all a sheet of Tyvek paper, which is like this weatherproof construction wrapping. And we made a series of murals that went down 60th Street in Columbus. And this is my take on the last 8 months, which, is ominous and grotesque, but surreal and kind of funny and insane. And that's sort of just how I felt it was going. Okay, so this is the last project I did. This is the end of my thing. I know I'm a minute over. Gail, don't shut me off. So during the pandemic last March, as I mentioned, I was reading Linda Barry's book. I got it for my birthday last May. And so from May until now, I've been working on a series of 60 self-portraits based on creative prompts. So the idea is that you take a deck of cards and you write all the prompts on the deck of cards. And so every time you sit down, you pull one out, and whatever it says, you have to draw it. And you have exactly 3 minutes to do so. So this is a series of prompts that I did of self-portraits. and they all have just like ridiculous things to keep you moving and keep it creative. And it was really just for something for me to do, so that I wouldn't go mad as I was isolated. But it turned into such a bigger project, and I really had fun with it. I started taking requests from people. This is a good friend of mine. He said, draw yourself as in a human zoo after the robo apocalypse. And I was like, that's perfect. At least they gave me a desk to use. And then some of them are just zany and just for fun. But there's just something so wonderful about having a time restraint. So do something in 3 minutes. I used a nib pen that you dip, the steel nibs. So there's no fixing, there's no underdrawing. It's just quick, immediate. And about halfway through the project, I realized that I was completely addicted to it. And I just keep making them. I have, more than 60 now. And it was just really this wonderful opportunity to kind of live out some wild fantasy. You're stuck in the house, you're isolated, you can't go anywhere, you work from home, your kids are home, but I can also be an action figure, and I can also play bad jazz. And I can also get shaken down by the mob, should have paid them off. And it just became this really wonderful outward expression that was so different than anything I was doing in my sort of painting with a capital P. And it really became this wonderful way of living out loud when I couldn't. So that's my spiel. I know we're 4 minutes over, but I'd love to take some Q&A if anyone has any questions. This slide you're looking at here is just this is the wall when I left my residency in Vermont. And I always think it's a funny slide because every time I show it, people are like, that's so cool. And it's like, I just showed you 100 pictures of my work, and this is the one you're getting excited about. But it is cool. And this is the process, right? This is the painting process. This is what is left behind. So there we are. So I'm going to stop share, and we have our guests. And if anyone wants to unmute and questions or throw it into the chat, I'm happy to answer.
Mr. Vanderberg, it's Julie McCoy and Lynn Parrish. How are you?
How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you. I think we see a definite transformation in your work since we first bought some of your paintings in the early 2000s, mid 2000s.
Very early 2000s, yes.
I do follow you on Instagram because I'm a social media whore, and I have no problem admitting that. So I love the cartoons. I definitely did not know your rope story. I know you had always boated with your dad. So now I see our ribbons of the year and how that came to fruition, so to speak. But definitely liking your down the drain painting and the other work that you're doing. So that's and some of the work I had not seen. So thank you for educating us about where you've been and where you are and where you're going, because I think that's really interesting to us as art people, so to speak.
Absolutely. Great. Yeah. Thanks so much. Yeah. And that painting that you have is coming. It's like right at that moment. That was like right after my graduate program and right before the lines. And that was a real cusp painting. So that's great. Thank you.
I like that painting. I like you were talking about transparency a little bit before, and every time I look at that, I see something different. I do see a lot of things going under other things, and you kind of know that it's there, and it continues somewhere else. So I mean, when I look at that, I like looking at that.
But I have one final compliment for you, actually. When I was doing a Zoom meeting in my office and happened to be walking in front of your painting in our living room, my coworker said to me, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were at a museum." And I said to her, "Elisa, this is my house." So kudos to you, Mr.
Very nice. I appreciate that. That's great. There's a question in the chat. Are there any particular artist that really moves you or is a strong influence? I definitely came up from the New York Studio School. That's what I studied when I was an undergrad. I was highly influenced at that when I was in my graduate program. I think when I really got my head around Willem de Kooning, that was just blew me out of the water. But right now, I have to say, I think historically, I think, I'm all in with Guston. I'm really into his work and his structures and what he's doing and what he did. Contemporary painters, as I mentioned, Catherine Bradford, I think she's probably making some of the best work out there right now. And Amy Stillman, maybe, if I can put these in the chat if anyone wants to check them out. Amy Stillman is unbelievable. It's really interesting. I sort of was like trained in the classic patriarchy of, my professors were older white men and they taught me about older white men. And it seems like the only painters I look at now are women, which is, I don't know what that means, but they're making great work. Any other questions, thoughts, concerns?
Sure. I'll jump in, James, if that's okay.
Sure, Mark. Thanks for coming. Appreciate that.
Yeah. No. Thinking about, say, older white men that sing to me when I look at your work would be he's not that old. He's still alive. Bryce Marden and his calligraphic style. But that's not my question. Especially at the beginning of the talk, you used the word destroy, that when you're painting over these things, you said destroy, and I just challenge that notion. It's sort of it's all part of what you see on the top is just a reflection of how you started. Amy Silliman's a perfect example of somebody who starts one place and ends somewhere else. And older white men, say Blakelock, paintings that have 20, 30, 40 layers of paint on them.
Right.
So why do you think you're destroying your, why do you consider the underpainting an act of destruction? Obliterating the underpainting an act of destruction?
That's a great question. I think if I had, I don't know. I think I like the word destroy. I struggle with the act of play. Like, I struggle with the act of, like I mentioned, I am looking over my shoulder at my children and their freedom, and I envy it. I will absolutely say that I envy it. So I definitely, when I'm in the studio, it's not that I'm like an angry painter, but I definitely want to like obliterate things that don't work. And I've never actually been able to consciously underpaint, like consciously know that this will be taken away. That doesn't work. So for me, it has to be a almost like a conflict, because then I'm sort of reacting against what was put down, recognizing that it's not working, and then making another move. But if I'm like, oh, this will be underpainting, it never works out. Bob, you had a question?
Hey, James, I just want to say, wonderful presentation, and what a treat to see the span and scope of your work, particularly your most recent work. I love the cartoons, but one thing that I really like so much was your black and white wash small works that you've done thousands of, and the transparency, beauty of blacks and all the tones in the middle. And then the jump into color. And by themselves, they're just great. I mean, they're just, just take one of your black and white works and put it next to one of your color, and you go, well, I can't choose. But one of the things that I just love is your sense of color, your compositional ideas, but your sense of color and colors that overlap and washes that overlap. So I'd love to see you in the process of doing one of those, because I'm trying to imagine, so how do you kind of, other than having done this 1,000 of times, but really make that leap into color and that sense of which colors and what you'll be doing with those colors, because it's all amazingly controlled, but it also looks just completely immediate and spontaneous. So I'm just kind of interested to know a little
Yeah,
bit what you're thinking and going through when you're making those wonderful color paintings. What's the color alone is just knockout.
so they're definitely related in lots of ways. I mean, I think that, compositional color is definitely a way to think about it. And like when I think in the studio about the drawings, I think of them like bones. I always talk about them like structures that are going to hold up something else. And oftentimes they don't. Oftentimes those drawings don't become paintings. I mean, otherwise I'd have thousands upon thousands of paintings. But they act as a sort of, structure that I might pin up. I mean, in my studio, I'll have a canvas on the wall, but then I'll have, 30 of those drawings pinned all around it. And they become sort of like reference points for the shape of color or the position of color within the square. And, it's funny, when I was in graduate school, I was struggling, and I had a teacher that was like, I'd go back to basics, just paint in black and white. De CUNY did it, Franz Klein did it, like just go to black and white, you can't lose, figure out what you're doing, and then deal with color later. And it was a total disaster, and the paintings were absolute trash. And that's when they were like, maybe this isn't the place for you. Maybe this isn't working out. And I had this mid-program review, and they were like, nah, this isn't going to happen. We'll send you to Paris, get the hell out of here. So I went to Paris, and, I will not lie when I say I went to go see La Nymphias every day that I could. It was on the walk to my school, and on the walk home, I'd go in there and I'd sit. And I learned more about painting from just looking at those paintings than anything I learned in my entire life as an artist. And it's there that you see Monet moving color in these structured layers, and, scrumbling and whipping and calligraphic marks. And I mean, it's a, he was like fencing with those canvases and creating those layers of light and those experience of light, building light. So after, so then the black painting, I was like, I'm not going to paint in black and white. I'm going to paint in color, but I'm going to build my drawings in black and white. And it's funny because I'll make canvases in the same way and they don't work. And I'll make drawings in the same way as the canvases and they don't work. So it's, the ink drawings on paper become a conversation with the color paintings, and that's the only way they can go back and forth for me.
Well, I also wrote down one of your great quotes as also an art school graduate. I think the quote was, if you want to strangle the creative process, go to art school.
Yeah, well, a little bit. I think so.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Any other questions, thoughts? Yeah, Roberta, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to say I love the mark making on the black and whites as well. That really was very interesting. The amount of, I guess, courage when you're sitting there looking at a white piece of paper that's so pretty, just going in there with a dark brush. Yeah, I really like those mark making black and white small ones. Those are very beautiful.
Thank you.
And
yeah, it's, that's honestly, I mean, if I were to teach someone like what to do with these types of things, if I had a lesson for it, it's you have to basically create problems for yourself. And my problem is to buy a really beautiful, expensive pad of 200 sheets of paper and to blow through it in a week and just not think about it. Like, make a mark, rip it off, make a mark, rip it off, draw something, rip it off, dump water on it, see what happens, rip it off. And it's almost so much more about that process than the end result. And then the end results become beautiful. And some of the marks become memory. I could probably make certain drawings with my eyes closed because I know what my wrist will do and I know what my arm will do. But yeah, I mean, and that speaks to the little cartoon prompts. It's like, what challenge can I create for myself to work with abandon, to take ink on paper with no preliminary drawing or no thought or structure in my head, and just have someone say, go. And then you're like, oh, I gotta do this. And, it takes 1,000 times to feel good about it. But now I can't even paint without drawing 30 drawings just to warm up. It's like stretching before a run or something.
If I can interject though, that whole problem of the blank white canvas is sort of everybody's fear. And so that's the beauty of working on your previous what you've already laid down is sort of what James said, this isn't working, so I'm going to put on another layer. I don't have to worry about having just screwed up $50 canvas and 10 hours preparing it.
Right.
We have this idea of the fear of the blank canvas, right? And so one way to forget the fear of the blank canvas is not to use a blank canvas.
To destroy it. Anyone else? Questions? Was anyone brave enough to draw a self-portrait? Anyone want to share?
James, I want to say.
Yes, Linda. Good to see you.
Thank you for inviting me to this. And I'm trying to figure out if I knew this before I hired you, if I'd still have hired you. I feel like, this is a really very personal sharing, as anybody who creates things shares with other people. And I think that took a lot of guts and a lot of courage to do that. And you did it very, very well. So you've given me a lot to think about. And it's a little icky in a way, because I feel like, you've just kind of sort of taken your clothes off and I see a whole different, side of you. So it's probably good we're working on Zoom now. But I really
hope it's a good side. I hope it's a good side.
Yeah, definitely good side. But I think I really enjoy the way you talk about your art. And it really shows in terms of when you're teaching, no matter who the group is. And I look forward to when we can actually be in the museum and it's open and you can really, really put it to the use that you've displayed tonight and, up until this point. And that you'll just go wild in terms of what you can do with the things that we have in the building. So I really am very proud of the job that I did in hiring you. So just don't screw it up, okay?
So far, so good, I gotta say.
Okay.
So did anyone draw a self-portrait? Don't be shy. We can share it. Margaret, you did one? No? Oh, we got one. Here's Roberta. Hold on, let me spotlight you. There you go. That's good. I love it. Any others? Anyone brave enough to try it? There we go, Mona. All right, hold on. There she is. See? No stick figures.
So I did one. Can you see it?
Hold on. I got two. Let me see. Go ahead, Liz. There you go. That's surprisingly accurate. That's a really good self-portrait.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I got a big head.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Where were you, Berkeley? You had yours up. Let me see it. Very nice. It's a beautiful sweater there.
So what I really enjoyed most was the fact that you say you're drawing constantly, and and just the amount of work that you accomplish, the numbers of paintings that you accomplish, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And every artist should be doing that. And I wish I was doing that, but I never seem to find the time to do it. So I have to now I have no excuse to not do it. Since you have a full-time job and a family and kids and all that stuff. And
well, I appreciate that, because I am constantly walking around with imposter syndrome that, I'm not working enough, or I'm not making enough, or any moment that I'm, watching Netflix or sitting around, I could be in the studio, I should be drawing, I should be, and maybe it's compulsive. Maybe that's what I need as an artist, is to be that way. I will say, if you want to find time, lose it, and then you'll find it. I only can work like this because I have to treat it like going to the gym, or I work with my kid. If I want to paint, I know they're going to come down to the studio and bust chops. So I have to actually set them up first and say, hey guys, let's go paint. And then I can work, and then they can work, and then they get bored and they leave, and then I can still work. So it's all a plan. It's all a plan.
You got to figure it out. That's good.
Thanks so much, James. This has been fantastic. I mean, I knew you were an active painter. I don't know how else to put it, but an artist in practice, as well as shepherding us docents around. And this was great fun. I'm now following you on Instagram. You should know.
Okay, good.
But nice. I loved, I love the cartoons. I love the self-portraits. I and everything everybody's talked about. The triptych really got me, and the process that you showed. I just and the quick sketches out the windows of Bailey Island. I love that part of Maine, and it just really spoke to me too. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming out. Gail, I know our 20-minute with 10-minute Q&A turned into almost an hour, so I apologize, but I will close. We'll close. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. This is going to be an ongoing series, as Liz mentioned. So, tune in, check back at Arts at Clark at the Memorial Library, and you're going to, I think, Roberta, you got a thumbs up there. I think you are next. So get excited for Roberta Scott, accomplished artist in our area. She will be presenting next month. So stay tuned.
Okay. Thanks so much, James.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excellent job.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much, James, for this thoroughly interesting presentation. I was especially impressed by the amount of work you get done, given that you have a full-time job and 3 young kids. I could see that our Zoom audience enjoyed it too. Thank you so much for joining us. Our next Artist in Conversation presentation is scheduled for April 22nd with Roberta Scott, another Bethany artist. Please visit our website, www.bethanylibrary.org, for more info about Roberta and to register for the online Zoom event. Thank you very much.